What is going on, guys? And today we're going to talk about what if Tanjiro was in My Hero Academia Part 2. I hope you guys enjoy. We start off after the training battle exercise from the last part with Tanjiro's team winning. All the other teams win as normal, so we don't have to go over them. After this, the USJ training exercise is announced and all the students get their costumes. Tanjiro's costume is pretty much similar to the one he has in the original Demon Slayer series, only it is sleeveless and the Komodo acts more as a cape than anything. After this, we then enter into the USJ, and like normal, villains attack. Real villains come and try and fight the heroes. Tanjiro is teleported with Izuku since he would reasonably be the closest to him, and since I must just say Mineta is not part of the series at this point, because honestly, I don't know how he'd get in. I mean, I don't know how Invisible got in, but yeah, we don't talk about that. But basically, the Tanjiro, Izuku, and Tsuyu are all together on a boat, in which Tanjiro states that since his main ability is fire, or more specifically, like a solar flame, water is kind of his greatest weakness. Tanjiro then goes how the villains probably don't know any of the students' quirk, and that their best bet is just try and get out of this in a very simple fashion. Everything in the sequence pretty much goes as normal, only instead of Mineta throwing balls at the villains, Tanjiro, well, does nothing, because he really can't do anything here, can he? They all head to the main part of the USJ, where a very itchy individual is talking. This obviously is Tomura standing next to Kataguri. I hope I'm saying that right. And here is where the story will differ in a major way. Because of the USJ's build, they have a sunroof, like greenhouse-esque build, which means Tanjiro's powers are not dulled here. And when Shigaraki was going on with how the Nomu can kill All Might, and how Shigaraki was about to kill Tanjiro's own teacher, Tanjiro and Izuku would both step in. Because of the nature of Tanjiro's quirk and his own idea of breathing, he would then kind of have like a solar, I'm not gonna say flare, but he does increase like a barrier around him of a blinding light. And this would go off in a very quick succession, creating an after image in almost anyone's eyes surrounding it. The Nomu will attack it, realize it's an after image, and after its attacks, the illusion would fade, and Tanjiro would punch Nomu in the face. And this is when Tanjiro gets to the idea of a new technique that he will call the Solar Rainbow Haze. I know this is not what it's actually called, but I don't know why he'd call it anything else other than like a rainbow haze or a solar flare or something like that. But basically, the basic idea of it's an after image illusion. After this, everybody is kind of on a loop because of how their vision has been altered. So at this moment, pretty much no one's gonna do anything for a little bit besides Tanjiro and the Nomu. Tanjiro obviously increasing the oxygen flow in his body for breathing techniques, eventually does try and overpower the Nomu, and because the sunlight being directly shined on him, he's at his strongest, and eventually it hits high noon, when Tanjiro is at his very strongest, and he will then perform the strongest version that he could possibly make, the strongest Ember. Because of the nature of this attack, the upper body of the Nomu would actually get, all the skin would have gotten burnt off, and Tanjiro would kind of feel a bit proud of himself until he realizes that the Nomu can just grow it all back, and disappointment settled in as fast as possible. The Nomu would go swinging for a giant ass slap, and then Izuku would jump in and use a smash. He doesn't really have a name for any of his techniques at the moment. It's a simple smash, a simple punch to try and at least, negate the force of the slap. Around this time, Ida already contacted All Might, and pretty much other pros appear. And just like in the original, All Might fights the Nomu, beats it, and yeah, literally a lot of the original stuff. There's not a lot of things that would change until we get to the sports festival. Now, this is when a lot of stuff changes. The sports festival is still announced, and all the students have a week left. Tanjiro is thinking about new techniques, especially that solar flare technique where he created like a rainbow haze, and people were stunned. Now he's trying to focus on focusing on it towards the opponent instead of it being a everywhere technique. He's also trying to think of new ways to implement his flaming fist and flaming kick, and he even created a flaming dragon at one point comprised of solely kicks, and we will see that later though. Eventually the sports festival does come up, and everybody's wearing the UA uniforms, with Tanjiro wearing a short sleeve shirt and actually having his feet rolled up. Now this is when Todoroki tries to call out Izuku as his kind of rival, but he also goes to Tanjiro. Because of the nature of Tanjiro's quirk of flames, he does see Tanjiro as a stand-in to his dad. Not like, as a father figure, but because his dad is flames, Tanjiro's flames, and Todoroki specifically doesn't use flames, it's it's kind of like that. He thinks of, if he beats Tanjiro, he's better than his father. Because fucking daddy issues. But we don't talk about those things. Anyway, so we get to the beginning part of the sports festival, and this is the race. Of course, everybody gets cramped into the entrance, and this is when Todoroki freezes the floor. Now, luckily for Tanjiro, just because the sun is blocked doesn't mean his powers are useless, and he melts the floor beneath him, and using the heat as kind of a jet, he starts to fly through the air. But because it's not enough heat for it to just slowly fly, it's more of a glide. So he's gliding through the air, stopping, jumping again, gliding. He eventually does catch up to Todoroki, but Todoroki destroys a 0-point robot, and then 0-point robot to try and trick everybody, but Tanjiro simply goes over it, going around his problems instead of trying to face him head on. And eventually Tanjiro and Todoroki are kind of head to head, and they are kind of like this for most of the race up until the landmine, where Tanjiro's gliding eventually does catch up to him. He then has to use a technique he remembers his father teaching him, which is kind of him twisting his body around an arena so he can dodge multiple attacks. There was never really a name for it, but now he'll just call it the Sun Dance. Because of this, he was able to dodge most of the landmines, and eventually Bakugo even catches up to them, trying to yell how he's been excluded even though he's probably the best one out of everyone. Now, you have to keep in mind, Tanjiro kind of got the most points out of everybody, so he still gives the speech. I kind of forgot to put that in earlier, but it didn't really matter all that much. Just felt I should mention it now. He did give the speech. But basically, Bakugo's been feeling excluded, and now it's time for him to shine. He tries to get first place, but like in the original, Izuku still gets first place because he was smart. And then we get to the cavalry battle, where Izuku gets a 1 million bounty on his head. And since Tanjiro reasonably gets second place and Todoroki would get third, yeah, I think it'd be fair if Tanjiro would actually side with Izuku, since he's always been like that. It didn't really matter what placement he got anyway, he would have probably been on Izuku's team. Bakugo, once again, is feeling like he's been excluded. He feels like he should probably be at least in first place. Now, the way the cavalry battle is going to happen is Tanjiro and Izuku are on a team, with Tanjiro being the one of the back. I kind of forgot. I think it's like a horse or something. He's not gonna be on like the top. He's not even gonna be in the lead because of the nature of his quirk. He should be on the back. With Hatsume, I think that's her name, the one with the the eyes and shit and all the gadgets. She's also in the back. And instead of Tokuyami, I still think Uraraka Bach is gonna be the lead. And the battle begins, and pretty much because of Tanjiro's quirk, they get out of a lot of situations. Again, it's not a full-on jet yet, but it is somewhat like that, where it's enough for them to get out of situations. And because of Araka's quirk of gravity, it helps a lot more. So basically, for the entire cavalry battle, they could just run away. And that means that their band never gets snatched. So that's one of the big ones. The headband never gets snatched. And the cavalry battle kind of goes somewhat the same. Again, band never gets snatched. And then we get to the tournament. Now for the tournament, I'm only gonna switch out Tokoyami with Tanjiro to make it still easier for me and for you guys to understand. Most of the tournament goes the same, so we get to Tokoyami. Now since Tokoyami isn't here, it's Tanjiro, and that means it's Tanjiro versus Momo Yaoyorozu. And because of Tanjiro's very kind nature, he does not want to hit a woman. So what he does to kind of combat this is he uses an expanding clear blue sky. Basically makes a giant kick, which then summons a giant circle that will expand. Because of this, Momo would get flung out of the ring because of the pressure of the heat. And then, technically speaking, Tanjiro never hit her. And Tanjiro doesn't feel as bad as it. But Momo's self-esteem does still get hit. And may I even say, gets burnt because of this. And then we get to Bakugo versus Araka. Still happens the same way. And the quarterfinals still happen. Was it quarterfinals? No, it wouldn't be quarterfinals. Basically, the next round still happens the same way. Izuku still loses to Todoroki. But because Mina Ashido is still technically a girl to Tanjiro, he tries doing the same thing, but Mina is very agile, so Tanjiro has to make up a new technique where basically he uses multiple clear blue skies, but he'll just call it sun's rotation for now. There's no real manga thing I could use, but I thought this would just be cool to create new techniques that technically aren't in the manga but still make sense within the story. So yeah, multiple circles are going towards Mina, and eventually gets to the point where there's too much, and Mina eventually gets hit and knocked out the ring. And now we get to the semifinals. So I was right earlier. Basically, it's Todoroki versus Ida and Tanjiro versus Bakugo. Todoroki versus Ida still happens the same way, so there's not really a lot to talk about there. But now we get to Tanjiro versus Bakugo. Because of the nature of this fight, Tanjiro and Bakugo do still have a lot of history that they want to settle out. And Bakugo feels like this is the perfect chance since it's in public, and if he beats him, he finally can gloat about it. But obviously, nobody else really knows about this, drama in between them besides Tanjiro. And obviously, Bakugo and Izuku. Izuku's kind of worried because he knows Tanjiro won't go too far in this match, but he knows damn well Bakugo will. Oh, so the fight starts off slow. Basic flaming kicks, punches, basic explosions, but eventually they start talking to each other. And then they start just spilling how much they actually hate each other. Tanjiro would go off about how he hated Bakugo bullying Izuku for literally no reason other than the fact that he was quirkless. Bakugo's spilling how he hated that Tanjiro was always in the way, how he always thought he was better, how he always thought he was cooler because of his quirk. Basically, they'll go and they'll keep talking, and the more they talked about how they felt about each other, the stronger the attacks went. And the more that the audience of the festival started to know about their drama, and of course their classmates would hear about this, and they'll start having their own opinions on it, and all their opinions would just be based off what they're hearing, and because Izuku was there the entire time, he'd get a bit irritated because some of the opinions made no sense to him. They start going off about drama and stuff like that, and eventually Izuku would shout, stating that no one should have an opinion because no one was there. The only person who should have an opinion is himself, because he is technically the person who causes this. Eventually, Bakugo and Tanjiro would hear this, and this would just set them off even more, blaming each other. Because remember, Bakugo still technically wanted to be Izuku's friend, but he had a funny way of showing it. Eventually, Bakugo and Tanjiro would then perform their final technique against each other. See, they both really created to fight each other one day. Bakugo flings himself into the air and rotates his body into a circle of explosions to a point where a flaming inferno, I would say, would form around him. Then Tanjiro would light his foot on fire and allow him to spin into a circle until around the same effect is made. But it's different because of the nature of his quirk. He actually changes his shape to look like a dragon. Eventually, a dragon will spawn out of the circle, kind of like how a dragon is spawned from a portal or something like that. And then it'd be revealed to be Tanjiro with this pretty much preparing a kind of a spinning back kick. But of course, because of his speed, the flames would look like it's been delayed. Eventually, this dragon and this giant-ass vortex will collide, with Bakugo yelling, "Howitzer impact," and Tanjiro yelling, "Spinning back dragon kick." Eventually, they'll collide, and we'll have somewhat of a small struggle, only a few seconds. Eventually, a giant explosion of flames and explosions will be created, and then the steam, smoke, and dust will settle, with Tanjiro being the only one in the ring, and Bakugo being knocked out unconscious outside the ring. Eventually, a stretcher would show up because Bakugo was shown to have severe burnt marks, and Tanjiro's mark on his forehead actually got bigger than last time. Tanjiro would be concerned and would try and walk towards Bakugo, but then his body's fatigue would give in and pass out. Eventually, it's later revealed that Tanjiro would be the technical winner because he was the only one that lasted the longest, and now the final round would commence. Well, after Tanjiro recovers, Tanjiro is in the hospital bed, hospital-esque bed, as recovery girl kissed him and left, and Izuku would walk in with a few classmates walking close by. The classmates would obviously ask a bunch of questions about the drama in between them, the fact that they knew each other before school, the fact that they never talked to each other. They keep asking and asking and asking. Eventually, this got to Izuku to the point where he would yell at the classmates to leave. They'd all kind of leave, Uraraka looking at Izuku in a weird way, and then keep walking. Eventually, Tanjiro would look ashamed of himself, and Izuku would apologize, because technically speaking, Tanjiro and Bakugo only hate each other because Izuku was too weak to defend himself, so Tanjiro would defend him for him. Tanjiro, being he's really kind-hearted, so he'd be kind of oblivious to these feelings that Izuku feels like he caused all of this. Tanjiro stating that it's not his fault, it's really Bakugo's fault for bullying him in the first place. And eventually, this is when Bakugo wakes up and gets revealed the news that he lost. And Bakugo would begin to rethink a lot of things. This entire tournament, he was losing. one after the another. And it wasn't because he was weak, it's because he let his hatred get in the way, and he would reflect on this. Then the final round commences, with Tanjiro finally being fully recovered. He would walk on to the giant platform, with Todoroki also walking on the platform. Because of both of their matches, everybody's kind of rooting for one guy and the other guy. Like, there's no real clear side of what the audience wants to win. And eventually my guy would yell begin, and they would charge at each other, with Tanjiro having a flaming fist in one hand, and Todoroki having an icy fist on the other. And this is where we're going to end off this part. Thank you for listening, and have a wonderful day.